Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about some films I saw over the last month or so. Today I'm going to be talking about The Five Bloods, Artemis Fowl, The King of Staten Island, The Old Guard, and Palm Springs. There's going to be some timestamps in the description and on the video, and you should be able to skip around to the films that you're interested in hearing about. I am going to be talking about some minor spoilers, so if you want to go into any of these films completely blind, I recommend skipping those parts. There won't be any major spoilers though, so if you are still interested and would like to stick around, you can skip around to different parts and see what you're interested in. The first film I'm going to talk about is The Five Bloods, which is the latest Spike Lee joint and was released on Netflix a couple of weeks ago. It's about a group of Vietnam veterans who had previously buried millions of dollars in gold during the war and have now come to reclaim their money. The film opens up with a pretty documentary-esque kind of opening with lots of real-life footage of black activists and celebrities. This is pretty common for Spike Lee films. I remember it being in Do the Right Thing, and I remember it, I think, in BlacKkKlansman. I think it works a lot better in those films because those films are very much about race relations in their entirety, whereas this one, I don't want to say it's more subtle because Spike Lee has never really been subtle. It definitely isn't the main focus of this film, and because of that, it does kind of feel a bit out of place. The movie definitely picks up after the first hour or so, but for that first hour, I definitely felt that the movie felt quite amateur. There was lots of rushed and messy parts that I thought could have easily been cleaned up on if they just spent a little bit more time in the edit. There are a few flashback sequences where we see the group, the Five Bloods, during the Vietnam War, and although it is always clear that those scenes are those scenes because of a different aspect ratio and the military clothing, they always feel a little bit off-putting because nothing was done to de-age any of the actors, so you have these really old actors kind of during the Vietnam War, and it just feels a bit odd. It definitely isn't helped by the really awful effects. There's a scene during one of these Vietnam flashbacks where there's a helicopter kind of spinning out of control, and it looks worse than... It looks like a PS2 game. It's not great. There's definitely also a lot of predictable kind of plot points. You know, they're looking in the jungle for this gold that they buried years ago, and there's a bit where a character kind of goes to take a piss, and it is so obvious that he's going to stumble across something. There was also a character death that I saw coming a mile away. The way they framed it, it was really obvious it was going to happen. And talking about that death as well, that specific death ended up feeling really comedic, which I don't think was the intention. Obviously, it's hard to tell, but it didn't come across like that was what they were going for. As I said earlier, though, the movie definitely picks up after the first hour or so, and I think it's really carried by the performances. All of the actors for the Five Bloods have great chemistry together, and I have absolutely no issue believing that they had been friends for decades. And specifically Delroy Lindo, who I guess is kind of the star of the movie, gives an absolutely stellar performance. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the year he's one of the kind of runners for the best actor of the year. He really was fantastic, actually. Delroy Lindo's character as well was written really well, and I thought he was really interesting. He has kind of some regrets about things he did in the war, and his relationship with his son. And I found it very interesting. Again, his performance was excellent. I think when Delroy Lindo's character was on screen was when I was having the most fun while watching this film. Whilst the acting was great, though, I do feel like a lot of the Five Bloods did feel like side characters, other than Delroy Lindo. A lot of them just didn't have much to them. They all had kind of small little backstories, but nothing that really grasped me or interested me, which was a shame, really. I would recommend watching this solely for Delroy Lindo's performance. I mean, if you're a big fan of Spike Lee, I would also recommend it, but I definitely wasn't a huge fan of it. I'd probably give this a 2 out of 5. Artemis Fowl is an adaptation of the immensely popular book series that is now on Disney Plus and was released on Disney Plus because of the cinemas being closed. This movie was fucking awful. This movie was so bad. I'm really struggling to kind of write down my thoughts on this movie because I can't really think of much constructive criticism. It's all just like everything is just done so poorly and everything is so messy and the acting is absolutely atrocious. I know Disney recently especially has always been a little weird with how they go about things, but I definitely did not have a fun time watching this. Even if you are a massive fan of the original source material, I really wouldn't recommend this. I can't really talk about how faithful it is because, as I said, I haven't read the books, but it doesn't feel like this is what the books are about if the books were so popular, because the story is not interesting at all. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this film, man. There's just a lot of formulaic stuff. You know, there's a bit where a big kind of piece of information is given to a character just because it's on the news and the TV is just on, even though nobody was watching it. I do kind of feel bad for the main actor. I'm not sure what his name is, but he's a young kid and his performance is absolutely awful. But it's one of those things where it's like with child actors, the director really has to be pushing for the good performances. They really need to be doing new takes. They need to be talking to the actor about what they need to be improving. And it does kind of feel like they just use the first take for everything here. Like, I'm not sure what happened with this. I know there's been a lot of struggles. I think they've been trying to make this film for like decades now. But this ain't it. This ain't it. 1 out of 5. The King of Staten Island is the latest Judd Apatow comedy, and it stars Pete Davidson as an aspiring tattoo artist in his mid-20s trying to get his life together. I'll be honest, I was pretty skeptical about this film despite its positive reception. I'm generally not a big fan of these kind of SNL crew American comedies as much as other people are. I find that a lot of them are quite juvenile and just a bit visually uninteresting, but I'll be honest, I was pleasantly surprised here. This film was actually shot by Robert Elswit, who's the guy who shot There Will Be Blood and Punch Drunk Love. I think he did Nightcrawler as well. I think it was a really great decision getting this guy to do the cinematography because there's this really nice kind of gritty, handheld, close-up cinematography that reminded me a lot of the Safdie Brothers style. I think it really worked for this film specifically because of the kind of small-scale, almost biographical style that this film is taking. So whilst obviously Pete Davidson is a comedian and not a tattoo artist, a lot of the story follows his life pretty closely. Both the character and the actor had a firefighter for a father who died on duty. They both lived in Staten Island. They both dealt with Crohn's and depression, etc. I think Judd Apatow does this quite often for his films, but I haven't seen too many of them, and I think it was great. Talking about Pete Davidson though specifically, I think he really pulled off that awkwardness factor needed for a movie like this. And I think he's a really talented actor and a really talented comedian. And I think he was the highlight of the movie, which makes sense because he is the star of the movie. The comedy was decent. It definitely felt very improvisational, which I assume it was. This was kind of 50-50 for me because on one hand, the dialogue felt very natural because of it, but on the other hand, some of the jokes just didn't really land, and I assume it's just because of the fact that they were kind of just coming up with them on the spot. I think in general, if you're a big fan of kind of American comedy, you'll probably have a blast watching this. If you are a bit more skeptical, I'm sure you'll still enjoy this, but I don't think it'll be your favorite movie of all time. That being said, though, I did think the film was very funny, and there was a robbery scene in particular that I thought was great. But yeah, good film. Would recommend it. I enjoyed it. 3 out of 5. So I went into watching The Old Guard, which is a new Netflix original movie, pretty much blind. I knew it was an action movie, and I could tell it kind of had like CIA kind of roots, but I didn't know much past that. It starts off pretty bland, and that's exactly what I was expecting actually. It's just kind of the CIA, FBI kind of style action movie where they're trying to take down bad guys with guns, and you kind of get the point, right? Turns out that's not really what the film is about at all actually, and I wouldn't really cast this as a spoiler because it's all over the marketing for this film. I guess I just missed it. This is actually a film about a group of mercenaries that can't die. So it kind of works like Wolverine, you know, they get wounded and it just kind of regenerates and they're fine. I think this is a really interesting concept in premise, but I don't think it works for an action movie. I think it would have been great for a kind of smaller scale drama or character study, where you see how somebody deals with seeing everybody they know grow old and just having the cycle over and over and not being able to end it. Unfortunately though, for an action movie, it just doesn't really work. It means that all of the action scenes, regardless of how well they are made, just don't really have any tension to them. The action in this is very much like kind of John Wick, with a lot of kind of grabbing people and flipping them over and shooting them in the face and quick cuts. And the action definitely didn't feel like it was anything new, but it was fun to watch. But yeah, the problem was just I didn't feel any urgency at all. When you know that a character can't die, there isn't really much keeping you on edge. That being said, it's only like that for a little bit. The rules for this kind of regeneration make absolutely no sense. It does feel like they're kind of just making it up as they were writing it. There's so many weird rules. So like, they can't die, but then sometimes they can. Sometimes it just stops working, just because they don't know why. And sometimes it takes a longer time to do it, or sometimes it doesn't. It was obvious that they had this concept where the characters can't die because they have this regeneration ability, but then they realized a bit later down the line, oh shit, you know, this is gonna make a bad action movie, what are we supposed to do? So they kind of just were like, okay, I guess they can die, but then they only introduced that halfway through, and it feels a little bit unearned. And as soon as they bring up the fact that that can happen, it's really obvious that it's going to happen to the main character, because why wouldn't it? But yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I just don't think it was used in the right movie. There's this kind of moustache-twirling villain who wants to use their DNA to make some cure for cancer. The action scenes are fun to watch, but they're ruined by this awful soundtrack that I guess they decided to use this kind of pop music. Using licensed music in a film is really difficult. I think some films have pulled it off amazingly, and those that do it really well. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy films do it great. Trainspotting did it really well. A lot of Tarantino's movies have really great licensed music, but unfortunately, it didn't work for me in this one. Wouldn't recommend it. I guess maybe if you love action movies and you don't really care about any of that shit, but I did not enjoy this. 1 out of 5. Okay, so Palm Springs. It's a riff on the Groundhog Day formula. It was released as a Hulu original a little while ago. I'm not going to go into how annoying I think it is to release a film as a Hulu original, but that doesn't have anything to do with the actual film, and I found a way to watch it anyway, so I'm going to ignore that. I remember hearing pretty good things about this film when it premiered a while back at the Sundance Film Festival. That being said, though, I went in with pretty low expectations. As I said earlier, I've never been a big fan of those kind of American SNL crew-style comedies. Along with that, I generally really dislike these Groundhog Day kind of riffs. I feel like they don't really add anything interesting, and I feel like they kind of forget what was interesting about Groundhog Day. They always have a little twist, like Happy Death Day has that one where she has to figure out who's murdering her, and she keeps on living the same day over and over. There was some other Netflix film called Naked, I think, where he just wakes up naked every time, and it's like, I never felt like the time loop was the most interesting part of Groundhog Day. It was always, to me at least, just a plot device used to create interesting scenarios for Bill Murray's character and interesting development for that character. Palm Springs is pretty similar, it's still just Groundhog Day, but it's set in a different location. And it was actually kind of interesting because one of the jokes I think in Groundhog Day was when Bill Murray kind of says, "Oh, why couldn't this be a nicer day that I have to relive over and over?" And this film kind of takes a different approach where it's this paradise that they're stuck in, but then as time goes on, this paradise kind of turns into a hellhole. Whereas in Groundhog Day, it kind of becomes the opposite, where it's this town that he hates that he then starts to love after being stuck in this time loop. I think Kristen Milotti and Andy Samberg were a really great pair. I think they had great chemistry, and I really enjoyed the scenes they had together. The comedy's pretty funny. In terms of a comedy movie, it does its job pretty well. The one thing that kind of irks me is how they kind of try to explain how the time loop works. One of the things I loved about Groundhog Day is that they don't care. It's not explained. It's not supposed to be explained, because at the end of the day, a time loop doesn't make sense. It's just this made up thing, and trying to explain it isn't going to work because it isn't a thing. This film tries to explain how the time loop works using this kind of supernatural cave and the kind of quantum physics for how it works, and they can fix it if they blow up a certain thing at a certain time. I think the problem is it just doesn't make sense, and it just when those scenes are happening where they're trying to explain how it's happening, I'm just sitting there like, none of this makes any. This is not how this works. I'd much rather they didn't have a way of knowing how it happens. That's one of the things that I quite liked about Groundhog Day, is that Bill Murray didn't actually know that by being a nice guy and by kind of redeeming himself, he would be getting himself out of this time loop. It makes it feel a lot more genuine, the changes that the characters go through. I mean, it's a small thing. I'm sure lots of people wouldn't care about how that's explained, but that definitely did put me off a little bit. I don't want to make it seem like it ruined the movie for me, but it definitely stopped me from loving it. Yeah, I had a fun laugh though, and I would recommend watching this if you have Hulu, or if you don't and you can find another way of watching it. And I give this a 3 out of 5. I really appreciate you for watching. I'm going to be trying to do this more often, where every kind of few new films I see, I'll make a video just talking about my thoughts about them. I love just talking about film, and these videos are really easy to just kind of put together and just ramble about my thoughts, and hopefully some people care about them. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I tweet a lot, and you can find my account in the description below. If you want to see my reviews and ratings of every movie as soon as I see them, you can find my Letterboxd profile in the description as well. And yeah, that's about it. See ya.